The worst of the storm had passed, but still the wild floodwaters boiled around the little boat, the current forceful and relentless. You were exhausted and in desperate need of shelter. A glimmering hope loomed from the gloom in the form of a small island. Perhaps this was the sanctuary you so needed. Or did the island have something else in store for you? It is thanks to my incredible patrons, all named at the beginning, that I can continue to create these stories for you. I have a goal to make even more special stories, so should you wish to support me in this, as well as receive exclusive patron stories, the next of which is coming in a few days' time, you can become a valued patron at patreon.com/snoozewithsam. I'll leave the link for you down below. Many of you reach out to me, be it for support or simply to talk about life. Should you want or need to yourself, Instagram is the best place. Here, I can actually speak to you. So if you ever feel like talking, you can find and follow me there at Snooze with Sam. Lastly, thank you so much for listening. If you are new here, or just aren't subscribed yet, please consider doing so, as it is one of the best ways to support my channel. It is free and helps me more than you may think. So as always, lie back and take a deep breath. Welcome to Snooze with Sam. There was no wind, and the loch was still and glassy, if full of wintry leaves, branches and debris. A clear night sky and ever-threatening black clouds were at odds with each other, one promising an evening of crystalline stars, the other bouts of torrential rain. The late afternoon had delivered plenty of the latter, and the hull of your canoe had enough water sloshing around in it to tell the tale. You tried your best to keep your feet and precious mythology books from it, but they were already quite damp. Having been on the cusp of a breakthrough in fable science when the water levels rose suddenly, you'd packed all you could take in one canvas bag. It was heavy, cumbersome, and proving impossible to keep dry. Across the wind-churned loch, you'd dragged your paddle, with aching muscles and fatigued mind desperate for sleep and respite. Eventually, the storm had subsided and allowed you to paddle with economy and intent, avoiding large hazards in the water, such as drifting trees and even semi-submerged houses. A large flood had swept in. The previous night, the riverbanks had burst and rose water levels to an all-time high, cutting off villages and drenching farmland. The landscape had no option but to give, and as a result, the entirety of your surrounding world had drastically changed. In fact, you weren't even sure if you were on a loch at all. For all you knew, this was a field or road which had disappeared beneath a new world of murky, fast-flowing floodwater. In the distance, you did see tall glens climbing up out of the endless, shimmering ocean. Yet you didn't recognize them. They were smaller now, and much less steep to the eye. Even the might of the glens shrank within the mass of these floods. Something across the bow caught your eye, and you strained your eyes in the gloom to see it more clearly. A wooded hilltop rose out of the water, a little island all of its own, brightly lit by the low-lying moon. The air was warm, and there was a softness about it, almost a fragrance. With a nudge of your paddle, you steered for it, still more than half asleep. How hadn't you seen it before? It just appeared. It didn't take long before you brought your canoe up gently to rest on a side of the hill out of the main current, where little swirls and whirlpools made the vessel lurch and dance and bob about, until you found an overhead branch to hold on to. A little further along, you spotted a sort of beach, and you pushed the paddle into the water and brought the bow of the canoe up and onto a patch of grass. The moon shone directly at it and illuminated a firm branch to which you tied the painter to. Finally able to rest your cold, damp and weary body, there was little you could do to stop yourself from slumping into the bottom of the canoe pulling up a thick blanket around you and falling fast asleep. When you did wake, you didn't know whether you'd been asleep for a few hours or a full month. When you woke up, it felt like an entire season later, because you were warm, and the light through the trees and leaves was bright and sparkling. There were leaves. There couldn't be leaves out yet. Surely not. You blinked and rubbed your eyes, but there they were, leaves, and blossom too. You had to put your hand up against the brilliance of the sunshine, but the brilliance defeated you. There it was inside your eyes, like an ethereal glow, twisting and scintillating, like an old friend offering comfort. You lay aching and stiff where you'd dropped, and slowly let your wits come back to you. Was that a soft voice you could hear? Or was it just the murmuring of the loch lapping on the shore? The water sounded more like a gentle stream now, rather than a full-flowing flood. There was something else too. Birds. The sweet poetic tunes of blackbirds, sparrows, and yellowhammers burst across the sky. For all the world knew, it was already spring. There was a very sweet smell, some sort of blossom, and a warm, fragrant smell also. Was it smoke or incense? It was difficult to tell, but either seemed unlikely. But there it was, that fragrance, stronger by the minute. In time, you left the shelter of your canoe to lay eyes on the entirety of the island for the first time. It was true. Everything you sensed and touched with your eyes spoke more of spring than the depths of winter of which you'd known a mere evening before. Birds took to the wing with a vigour and energy of a new dawn, not a dark gloom, and the scents of 1,000 flowers drifted across the warm breeze like petals upon a flowing stream. Up the bank you stepped, following your nose. Still, Something drew you into the grasses and woodland. Underneath the lush trees, the light speckled and shone like diamonds under a spotlight. The ground teemed with wildlife. Butterflies, small mammals, and garden birds, all sharing the space in harmony. Through the back of the woodland, you saw a gap, and beyond it was a clearing of sorts. Emerging back into the warm sunshine, before you laid an open, natural amphitheatre made up of looming oak trees, flat-rocked banks, and athletic tree roots which sprung up from the ground. In the middle of all of this, sat at the heart of the soft grass, was a feminine figure about 20 paces away. She was busy, tending to a small but healthy fire. But all the time she seemed aware of your presence. Her long, golden hair hung softly around a pale, young face. A face which was kind, open, and somehow magical. She was beautiful. A simple green dress draped across her slender frame, though did not much more to protect her modesty. Otherwise, she was barefoot and unburdened. Raising her eyes from the fire, she invited you to join her, with an open hand facing the grass opposite the fire. There was an aura of calm surrounding this woman, and her strangeness was not uncomfortably alien, but assuring. It fit the ambience. This was an altogether strange place, yet gave you a similar feeling of trust. You had not a thing to worry about, and this woman knew it. Again, with piercing blue eyes, she ushered you over with a graceful gesture of elegant hands, and so you sat with her, finding comfort on the mossy grass. The look you exchanged was one of respect, understanding, and familiarity. You did not believe you had met before, but still something existed between you which spoke of friendships of old, perhaps lifetimes apart. The woman handed you a clay mug with speckled salt glaze, in which was contained tea. There was something otherworldly about the way she moved. It was a different pace to you, much slower and controlled, as though the action was prescribed and judged to a millimetre. You took the mug, grateful for the heat in your hands after the cold from the night storm clung to your bones. She must have read your mind, or your tentative eyes at least, as before you could speak, the woman spoke first.
You are perhaps wondering who I am, or where you are you not?
You nodded gently, willing her to continue.
The flood was no accident, nor was it something that you could have known was to come. It was born from a world parallel to your own, but out of sight and mind.
Her words confused you. What did she mean? Looking around again at your surroundings, it did seem clear that something had changed. Perhaps this was not your world that you knew. Had you found yourself in another somehow?
It is neither chance nor luck which has taken you here to this island,
the woman said with a warm expression.
A force out with your control took you to these shores in safety and sanctuary. Where and when we met, I never did know. But we were to meet. That was always certain.
By now, your mind was spinning. Who was this woman? And how did she know you were to arrive there? Where were you? What was real? And were you imagining this whole episode? Had you taken a knock in your canoe during the storm, and this was in fact all a dream or wild hallucination?
No, fear not. You are not dreaming, nor are you hallucinating.
The fair lady spoke, clearly hearing your thoughts.
To answer your questions, I ask you to humour me in the telling of a tale.
You obliged, and clutching your cup of tea, allowed the lady to share her stories. Beneath the warm sunshine, the woman spoke of a devout clergyman who was returning home upon the remote island of Jura after administering spiritual consolation to a dying member of his flock. It was late of the night, and he had to pass through a good deal of uncanny land. He was, however, a good and conscientious minister of the gospel, and feared not all the spirits in the countryside. On his reaching the end of a loch, which stretched along the roadside for some distance, he was a good deal surprised at hearing the most melodious strains of music. Overcome by pleasure and curiosity, the minister coolly sat down to listen to the harmonious sounds, and attempted to decipher their nature and source. He had not sat many minutes before he could distinguish the approach of the music, and also observe a light in the direction from whence it proceeded, gliding across the loch towards him. Instead of taking to his heels, as any faithless might have done, the pastor fearlessly determined to await the issue of the phenomenon. As the light and music drew near, the clergyman could at length distinguish an object resembling a human being walking on the surface of the water, attended by a group of diminutive musicians, some of them bearing lights, and others instruments of music, from which they continued to evoke these melodious strains, which first attracted his attention. The leader of the band dismissed her attendants, landed on the beach, and afforded the minister the amplest of opportunities to examine her appearance. She was a little bedraggled looking, a blonde-haired lady, clad in the most grotesque habit the clergyman had ever seen, and such as led him at once to suspect her real character. She walked up to the minister, whom she bowed to with grace, offering an apology for her intrusion. The pastor returned his compliments, and without further explanation, invited the mysterious stranger to sit down by his side. The invitation was complied with, upon which the minister proposed the following question: "Who art thou, stranger, and from whence?" To this question, the fairy, with downcast eyes, replied that she was one of those sometimes called Don-shi, or people of peace, or good men, though the reverse of this title was more fit appellation for them. Originally angelic in her nature and attributes, and once a sharer of the indescribable joys of the regions of light, she was seduced by Satan to join him in his mad conspiracies. As a punishment for her transgression, she was cast down from those regions of bliss, and was now doomed, along with millions of fellow sufferers, to wander through seas and mountains until the coming of the great day. What their fate would be on this great day, they could not divine, but they apprehended the worst. And, continued the fairy, turning to the minister with great anxiety, the object of my present intrusion on you is to learn your opinion, as an eminent divine, as to our final condition on that dreadful day. Here the venerable pastor entered upon a long conversation with the fairy, touching the principles of faith and repentance. Receiving rather unsatisfactory answers to his questions, the minister desired the fairy to repeat after him the Paternoster, in attempting to do which, it was not a little remarkable that he could not repeat the word art, but said wert in heaven. Inferring from every circumstance that the fairy's fate was extremely precarious, the minister resolved not to puff up the fairy with presumptuous and perhaps groundless expectations. Accordingly, addressing himself to the unhappy fairy, who was all anxiety to know the nature of her sentiments, the reverend gentleman told her that he could not take it upon him to give them any hopes of pardon, as their crime was of so deep a hue as scarcely to admit of it. On this, the unhappy fairy ushered a shriek of despair and plunged headlong into the loch, and the minister resumed his course to his home. Every possible equation was dissected and solved as far as possible during the telling of the story, and so you presumed that this person sitting opposite you was, in fact, no woman at all.
You are right in your assumption. The fairy in the story was me indeed,
they said, with a neutral tone and rather blank expression. But what did that mean? You thought to yourself. What had the fairy done? Why were they here now, with you? Were they bad? Dangerous? What should you do now?
Be at peace, my friend. I am no more a danger to you than you are to me. I have wandered the lands of this earth and many others for thousands of years, and I have seen more good and evil than I care to admit. When dicing and dancing between realities, the lines of each can become blurred, skewed, and sometimes meaningless. Perspective changes, and so does interpretation, and when dealing with the courses of spiritual powers, they are not so forgiving when the tide of one's soul changes. My sins? Well, some may say they are not sins at all, but merely a part of being a conscious, living soul. So many even call it being human. And so this is why I'm here, on this island. Still, I roam the waters and sea, treading the thin veils between worlds, living but also not. One day, I hope to return to the regions of the light, a place where I can call home.
Every word from the fairy tumbled into the next. You couldn't believe what you were witnessing, and still the question of your arrival burned a hole in your mind, though you feared to consult the answer you so surely anticipated.
Am I right in saying that you have invested a great deal of time and energy studying the parallels between your reality and that of myth and lore? And, with your sympathetic consent, I wish to seek your help in returning to those lands once and for all.
And so, sitting around the fire, across from the troubled fairy, you gazed into space, trying to make sense of everything. With the birds singing relentlessly, the warm breeze still impossibly comfortable on this supposed winter day. You looked the fairy in the eyes, and it was here that you consulted your destiny.